Let's start.
It's starting. Good.
Okay, so hi everybody, and welcome to our third seminar. The speaker today is Violeta Calleja Solanas, and she is a PhD student at IFISC in the wonderful island of Mallorca, and I am not at all biased. And you may know her as the chair of the Young Researcher of the Complex Systems Society, or for the work on ecological networks. And today she is going to share her experience in dealing with the three P's: procrastination, productivity, and PhD. So Violeta, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, let me share my screen. Sharing. Okay. Okay, perfect. So let's start. I was looking forward to presenting this talk. And let me start with an important warning about looking for advice. And to do that, let's recall this proverbial advice. The perfect is the enemy of the good. Okay. But also we have this other proverbial advice. Do it well or not at all. Kind of opposite. Let's continue. Two heads are better than one versus too many cooks spoil the broth. Okay, there is a tendency here. Do you see it? Let's finish with he who hesitates is lost versus a stitching time save 9. Okay, they are contradictory. And what I want you to tell you with this is that advices depend on context. So an advice that have worked for somebody may not work for you. And an advice that have worked previously for you in other situation may not work, but that's totally perfect. So don't worry and don't panic. Just take the time to know each other. To know you and to listen to you. And irrespectively that the advices are context dependent, here I have a promise for you. And the promise is that at the end of the talk, you will end up with a new vision about how to get your work done and some tips about productivity and procrastination that you have never heard of before. Pretty cool, isn't it? And so the outline of the presentation is quite simple. First, we are going to talk about being productive. What is being productive and how to become really productive? And then it's the turn of procrastination. And we'll talk about how to overcome the pain to start to do a task, and then to overcome procrastination more in general. And then we will finish on how to PhD. And I will share with you some hints that I have found during my now 4 years of PhD. And then I would really like you to share your experiences and hopes. So I have prepared a spreadsheet, so then we can go there and talk about that, our problems, and feel and share our tips there. So what's being productive? Well, being productive is maximizing the function of the work you produced. And the work you produced is proportional to the intensity of focus times the time you have spent doing that task. And also being productive is a wave. And that means that there are some peaks of productivity that you can enjoy and protect, but there are also valleys of productivity. But don't exasperate, don't panic, because it's on the nature of productivity to be wavy. So after a valley, a peak will come, and maybe the slope of the peak is not very high, but it's going to be one later. And then what is not being productive. Being productive is different to being busy. Being busy basically is multitasking, is doing a lot of small tasks, and being busy is basically when you end your day and you feel that you have not pushed forward your goals, but you have been occupied doing things all the day. And another important aspect is that when you are busy, you are so nervous that you immediately respond to a sudden task and stop what you are doing, which is something that you should not do. And also, productivity is not linear. That means that if you increase the number of hours, that does not imply that you increase your work done. Take a look again at the equation. At some point, this part of the time spent is going to, let's say, saturate, and what is left is the intensity of focus. So the real value is the clarity of thought. And how we are going to have clarity of thought? Well, for me, it has been very interesting to think that actually we have to manage our energy, not just our time. And why? Well, recap the equation again. the energy is here, is in the intensity of focus. And this part is a very important point to remind you to be kind to yourself, because if you are not kind to yourself, you are going to decrease your level of energy. And what I mean with that, we tend to think that our self-critique will boost our productivity, but this is quite the opposite. It will drain our energy. And especially that we are studying a PhD, we should not compare ourselves to other students, because each PhD is unique. And that means that it requires a different path. So it actually makes no sense to go to Google Scholar and spend hours criticizing yourself. It's not going to get you to any point. And also, sometimes we think that we can only work under pressure or when a deadline is approaching. And that might be true that we can only work under pressure, but keep in mind the amount of energy that we have wasted being anxious because we are under pressure. All that energy is wasted, is gone. Okay, but how we manage our energy. So I have written down some typical advices that I would say that these advices are the only advices that are really not context dependent, that this works everywhere. That is, take breaks, quality breaks. And by quality breaks, I mean standing up, drinking some water, going to the bathroom, really cleaning your mind, not just looking Instagram or Tinder. That's not a break, sorry. And then these 4 actions of sleeping well, eating healthy, working out, doing some sport, better if it's surrounded by nature, and then having social interactions of quality. Sometimes if something is not working and you do not know what is that, maybe there are some of these things, the things that are missing out. But during this talk, I'm going to center about learning to prioritize, which is very, very important to be productive. So, okay, how we prioritize? Well, we prioritize by learning very well to list and to scheduling our tasks. I love to do lists, but I'm going to talk about them in the procrastination part. However, there are more things about prioritizing. For example, learning to say no. This is very difficult for me, and I have a lot of projects that are opened but unfinished, and I continually having new ideas, talking to people. Hey, we could do this or that or whatever. And for me, it's very, very difficult to say no. But at the end of the day, I have had to learn to say no. And how do you know to what tasks or projects say no and to what say yes? Well, to do that, we have the Eisenhower matrix that you have maybe seen it and not with this name, but basically it classifies the task in important and urgent, and the matrix suggests to us to do those tasks. There are also tasks that are unimportant but urgent, and we should delegate them. It's very difficult being a PhD student because you do not have something below you, but anyways. Then you have important tasks but that are not urgent, that you can decide to do them later on. And then non-important, not urgent, just say no. Personally, I would like to hear them your Achilles heels, but in my case, these important but not urgent tasks are tasks that I usually do instead of doing the urgent ones, because I don't know why actually, but I used to do them. And also the non-important and urgent, because I get really nervous and I do it quickly. That's my fault, I know. And now here it comes a particularly famous and popular advice that is swallow a frog in the morning if you want to encounter nothing more disgusting the rest of the day. And this means basically to do the most challenging, difficult, unpleasant task at, at the beginning of the day. Why? To not sacrifice your best cognitive energy, because remember again the equation. The work produced is proportional to the intensity of focus, your energy to focus times the time spent. However, here I must to disagree, because first, maybe you are not an early morning person and you are a night owl, so it makes no sense to do the most important task when you are asleep. And second, because there are some tasks that may drag you down. And in particular, I feel that some tasks, let's say, that block me and paralyze me. So when you are paralyzed and blocked, you are not doing the important tasks, but you are not doing anything else either. And if you have ever played Pokemon, that situation reminds me a lot when the player encounters a tiny tree that is very tiny, but in the game you cannot jump. So you are stuck here. It's very tiny, but you literally cannot do it. And when you cannot do it, what happens? That procrastination appears. Chun chun. So what is procrastination? According to Cambridge Dictionary, the verb procrastinate means to keep delaying something that must be done, often because it is unpleasant or boring. And we have here a wonderful example. I know I've got to deal with a problem at some point. I'm just procrastinating. That's basically the essence of procrastinating. And according to scientific research, a task that you don't want to do actually activates the brain region responsible for pain. So literally, that task is hurting you, but there is hope, because that pain disappears shortly after. So one method to deal with procrastination is to overcome the pain to start. And how can we do it? Well, the first advice is to focus on the process, not on the product. And this is a chain of mindset. I mean, if you say, I should write section 2.1, this is a product, and it might seem overwhelming. But if you say, I will write for 20 minutes about the method X, that of course is going to be in section 2.1, but this is a way more accountable task. Another tip is to mind mapping. Of course, I am going to share with you the links to these advices because I cannot explain all of this in just 30 minutes. But basically, mind mapping is not to organize, but to write down your ideas to inspire you more ideas. Here I have my mind maps of this talk. Basically, this is very useful when you have to write or create a talk. So I have written in the center of the paper the main topic, and then I draw arrows with other subtopics, and then that subtopics remind me other ideas, and the tree continues to grow. Another technique is the Pomodoro Technique that I suppose that some of you might have heard about it. Basically, it suggests to you to work for 25 minutes and then rest for 5 minutes. And this technique for some of my friends is very, very useful. And actually now they measured their study sessions in Pomodoro units. But in my case, it didn't work quite well because for me, 20 minutes of working is okay if you are debugging some easy code. But if you are studying something really hard, you have to go into it, and 25 minutes is not enough time. But I have found that the Pomodoro technique is very useful as a warm-up. What I mean with a warm-up. Okay, if you are training and you want to do pull-ups or lift some weights, you are not going to do it right now. First, if you want to prevent injuries, you will warm up your muscles. So this is exactly the same. The brain and the memory is also a muscle. So basically, it means that instead of starting to derive some very hard equation the first thing, you can do one Pomodoro when you are reading the paper of those equations, and then after the break, then you start with a longer Pomodoro to really derive the equations, for example. And then also it's very useful to keep track of your progress, and better with a support team. I mean, with other students, for example, and not only during your PhD, but if you want to go into the gym, it's better to go with a friend because you do not want to fail that friend. Also, because keeping track invokes the do not break the chain effect. I mean, you do not want to break a 7-day streak of studying 4 hours in the morning, for example. And for that, and also as a warm-up, I usually do this app. It's called Forest. And basically, if you are not able to stay away of your phone during your Pomodoro, the tree will die. And I usually use it to warm up myself, or when my concentration is decreasing. But better to go analogical instead of having your mobile around there. Now we have arrived to my favorite topic, which is lists. And a lot of things have been written about lists. So I'm going to say to you here some of the basic, and then some of the most bizarre, but that for me works. And the basic one is that you should divide your tasks in chunks. And with chunks, I mean little subtasks that are smart. And with the smart, I mean it's an acronym. That means that subtasks must be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And an example is that it's way better to write down a task that is write first paragraph of results than write section 3. Again, this is too abstract. Then one trick about list is to write a list about what you have already done just to boost you, or a list of easy, rewarding tasks to again ramp you up. But be careful because we do not want to do these tasks, but the other 3, okay? Then personally, I really like to write lists with tick boxes just to do tick whenever I finished a task. Ideally, you should write the list for today, yesterday, so the day before. This is not already implementing in my routine, but well, ideally we should do it. And then my favorite part, which is writing a list of interesting things to do if you procrastinate. I mean, if definitely today is not your day, or you are very tired, or whatever the reason, you can have a list of interesting things, for example, soft skills to do when you are done with your important and urgent tasks. For example, I have a tab in my browser with a Python course because I want to learn Python. So whenever I feel tired, I go there and watch some videos or do some easy exercises. It's quite passive, so it's perfect for those moments. And now it's turned to one thing that for me was a game changer, and is learning to lower the bar. And with this, I mean that again, if you are super blocked and paralyzed, then just challenge yourself to do the bare minimum for that task, but at least do it. Even if it's the ugliest thing, at least you have done something, you have just show up. And this is very important because sometimes we tend to think that we rely on motivation, but motivation is a myth. Especially during a PhD, I have seen this word a lot of times. We want motivation student for this PhD position. Are you a motivated student? Work with that in whatever. And okay, it's true that you need motivation, because if you do not have motivation, go to the industry because the salaries are higher, for example. But motivation cannot be our fuel, because motivation is finite, and it's also very, let's say, very non-constant, also very wavy. So just if you are unmotivated, doing unmotivated, because procrastination at the end of the day is not about motivation, it's about habits. And this is quite important because in that way you can look for advices about how to change habits, and then implement those advices with your procrastination problems. Habits can be switched. So switching for procrastination, which is a habit, to other habits, for example, starting with Pomodoro sessions, is resource saving, which means that that routine uses less energy. And again, this is the last time I promised. Remember the equation. Okay. What's the anatomy of an habit? An habit has a trigger, which is the thing you see, you feel, And that trigger generates a response that is a routine. And that routine generates a reward. Always it generates a reward, even if you do not realize. And that reward usually is a rise on dopamine, serotonin, or whatever hormone. And these routines are part of a system of belief, because this is quite interesting that because some people think that you are your habits, but also this is a loop, and because your habits can define yourself. So changing yourself implies changing your habits and those things. This is quite cool. It's from this book, Atomic Habits, that I'm reading right now. But okay, let's go with an example. The trigger can be an email. You are working, and you pop an email pop-ups. And your routine is that you go to the browser and inevitably you will start web surfing. And what's the reward here? Where the reward is moving your mind focus to something more pleasant than doing that particular job. And the belief in here is that I'm a fraud, I will never overcome procrastination and those things. And the advice here is that to change a habit, you have to change the trigger, change the reaction of that trigger. And fortunately, this is the only part where willpower is needed. And to change that reaction to the trigger, we need to have a plan. For example, hide the phone, do a Pomodoro, stand up, run away the computer, go to the bathroom and return in 3 minutes, something like that. And in that way, the reward is going to be maybe just the feeling of control or pride that you have, or can even be a physical reward like a bar of chocolate, whatever. And the belief, okay, this is very Disney movie, a very Disney movie sentence, but the belief is that you can do it, basically, and that the 1% improvements are important. About that thing, I'm going to talk later on. But now I would like to challenge you to, during the next week, track your triggers and create a plan. And to give you an example, now I'm going to explain you my plans for when social media, especially Twitter and Instagram, YouTube, try to steal my attention. And I have chosen this precisely because I think that now, I'm not the only person who thinks that, but basically attention is the new currency. So here's another challenge for you. Try to not check your phone during the rest of the talk. It's going to be difficult, for sure. And well, I cannot do a talk without a little spam. The attention economy is very, very interesting. And actually, we have been studying this in information ecosystems. That is basically a very fancy name to say Twitter or whatever platform that has users and hashtags. Because at the end of the day, in those information ecosystems, hashtags and users are competing among users, hashtags among hashtags, more about attention. And by using the users one hashtags, they are cooperating. So there's competition, mutualism, and that systems can be studied as ecological system, which is pretty cool. So I'm finishing. Just take a look at the papers. I'm very proud of them. So for distraction related with social media, the most important part is to take care of your environment. So my advices are to track your phone use. You will be very surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised. For example, this is my phone a very bad day. 4 hours. This is absolutely crazy. Then you can switch off notification or just switch off the phone. And of course, you can also log in those apps with your browser. But I suggest you to delete the apps of the phone altogether. Sorry. And log out. Why? Because when you log out, you have to spend several seconds to log in again. And in those seconds, you have to think, I am deliberating entering, should I? So it's better to reflect every time you enter. Then I also use Forest, the other app, to focus and start to getting detached of my phone when I'm starting to study, and web blockers, that are extensions that track your time. And when you have spent X time in a website, now then you will not be able to enter again. Then put a phone in a different room or out of sight. These things might be very obvious, but really you have to hear them at least once. And then a new trick that I have not tried yet, that is use different browsers. One browser to work and another for personal uses. That might be interesting. And finally, the promising thing about the 1% improvement is that tiny changes make a big difference. And we tend to overestimate one defining moment, the moment when the hero decides to get into shape. For example, Mulan became a very great warrior in one song. And so we overestimate one defining moment versus and the underestimation of small daily improvements. For example, if you improve 1%, you get 1% better every day, at the end of the year, you will be nearly 37 times better than when you started. But actually, it's pretty good, especially if you take into account that habits often appear to make you know different until you cross a critical threshold. So it's like a phase transition. Imagine, for example, that you are a hammer and you are hammering away a rock, a very big block of rock. And you have hammered the rock 100 times, nothing has happened. And then the next time you hammer it, suddenly the block split in two. So in that moment, what the TV will tell you is that, wow, sudden success. One people hammer a rock and split it in two. But that's not true. You have had to hammer the rock another 100 times. So keep in mind that. Just recapping procrastination, just keep in mind that it's a habit. So I really suggest you to watch out your procrastination triggers and to make up a plan for them. Also, that you should plan your task every day by hand, write a list. This is super effective. And regarding eating your frogs, okay, eat your frog first, but if you cannot, have a backup plan, okay? Now, finally, we are entering in the how to PhD part. And well, I would like to tell you that I'm not a professional of psychologist, but I think that it's pretty normal if your current approach to the PhD is not working. Basically, because doing a PhD is not the same as studying a degree. There are several differences. For example, in a degree, you are constantly receiving input. But in the PhD, the input you receive is an input that you have to look for it yourself, and then you are required to do a lot of output, but we do not know how to do that yet. Then there is no fixed schedule, which can be very tricky at the beginning. The deadlines are diffuse. Yes, I have to do a talk for one conference in 3 months. Yes, I have to write down the thesis in 3-4 years. There is also no feedback in the form of exams or homeworks that were very useful for us. And finally, there is a bazillion of papers one click away, so you can be overwhelmed about the amount of literature you should read. So here are some hints about how to do a PhD that mainly I have found in here in this article that my PhD advisor, I remember that sent it to me the first day of my PhD. Then I printed it and put it in my workplace just to remember them. And let's start with a lie. The lie is, I don't need to write that down. I will remember it. That's not true. That's definitely not true. Write down everything for your future self. And this includes meetings and seminar notes, codes annotation. Please comment your codes for your future self. Your future self is very, very silly, stupid, and forgetfulness. Be kind with him or her. Also write about things that have not worked, because maybe you forgot about that and you repeat them again, and yes, that has happened to me. And finally, also write summarize of papers and lighten them. That's also very useful. Also, back up your work. Use Git, the cloud, your institution server, whatever, but you might suffer a heart attack if you do not back up your work. Also, organize your workspace. Here it's very personal. Then I will be very happy to hear your strategies. Mine is having a file system for every project with meaningful labels, notes, and comments in the codes. And with meaningful, I mean that at the beginning of the PhD, I divided the papers into categories, thematic categories, game theory, higher order interactions, whatever. But then at some point, I realized that there were a lot of papers that they were a mixture. Okay, these are social networks, but also marker chains, but also, so at the end of the day, I have decided to create one folder for each project, and all the papers related to that project goes there, because it's very easy to remember, oh yes, that paper, it came across when I was working about that, then, oh yes, that paper, yes, it's about game theory and ecology and spatial structure. In what folder of those it is? So for me, it's easier, but it depends on the person. And finally, I'm finishing with this advice, and it's never struggle on your own. Talk to other students. There are fantastic communities like this one, for example. Have frank discussions with your supervisor. Discuss with her your goals and the way you work and those things. It's going to be very useful. And well, I wanted to tell you more, but actually I have procrastinated myself. So I'm finishing here. Well, no, that's a joke. Here you have a links to some of the resources that I have talked about. And in the chat is written a link to this presentation, and also to a spreadsheet where now you can share also your resources. And that has been all. Now I'm happy to discuss and share and listen to you.
So thank you very much. Okay, I forgot at the beginning to share the spreadsheet that I'm going to share now.
Okay.
Sorry for that. So you see in the chat Google Doc with the spreadsheet written by Violeta that we can use during the discussion. So you can explain the how it must work, or maybe you can share the screen with your
Oh, yes.
spreadsheet
Okay.
if you want.
Yes, yes, sure. Here you. Okay. So basically, this is a data set with so a spreadsheet with also these links that are alive in the presentation. And you can take a cell and write whatever you want, like some trick hack book you have read that it has something to do with procrastination that you think is useful and you want to share. I don't know.
Okay.
I saw Steven Strogath use this method, so
Okay.
I wanted to give that a try. Let's say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think we are also open for question, or if you
Yeah,
if
sure.
someone has comments about that. I have someone, but if you want to start,